Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining our conversations today. It's nice to have you all here. I have the privilege of taking you through a few slides around apprenticeships, past, present, and future, and hopefully we'll all learn a few new skills, a little bit of extra knowledge, and so on, always important. Just on the opening slide, you'll see in the middle, there's a little booklet there called The Overview of Apprenticeships in South Africa. And if you colleagues, anybody would like a copy of that, we can always share it with you. My first few slides, I'm going to go across quite quickly, just to give you a little bit of a historical perspective of the apprenticeship processes. And in South Africa, many of you will know that apprenticeships and artisan development are very synonymous with each other. In fact, we use this expression these days in South Africa of A21, which can be both an apprenticeship for the 21st century or an artisan for the 21st century. And the interesting thing as well is in the Skills Development Act, there's actually a definition that says an apprenticeship is a learnership. So very, very closely linked. Two brief comments I want to make on this slide. Some of the colleagues might not know, but the naked courses, many of you will know them as N1, N2, and so on. They originated as far back as 1935, as well as the Center of Trade Testing, which today is known as IGLENA. This also just illustrates the resilience of so many of these programs, how long they last and so on, because many, many youngsters still do N1s. Similarly, in 1981, with the Manpower Training Act arriving and the training boards being set up, we started back then in the 80s, the CBMT processes of training apprentices called competency-based modular training. And today still, there are many, many youngsters, colleges, public and private, there's one example, False Bay, that still use those modules as the basis for apprenticeship training. So the old apprenticeship system is very resilient, has been around for a long time. On this slide, I also just wanted to pick up on two brief points. Many of you will know that from 1995 onwards, we had a whole range of modern legislation that came out around skills development, the SAQA Act, and so on and so forth. And in 2000, particularly important, the CETAs got established. We had the National Skills Development Strategy 1, NSDS 1. And those of you who were in the system those years will remember that learnerships featured very large in that strategy, but apprenticeships were nowhere to be seen. So we had a bit of an awkwardness for quite a few years where apprenticeships were almost not in any policy document, and certainly very little funding was going towards the apprenticeships. That started to change in 2008, 2009, 2010, and from about 2013 onwards, there was a huge move back towards the apprenticeship system. And I will always give credit to the current Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Dr. Blaise Monde, because he was the one that initiated that change really at a very high political level. And I was working at the stage with him there in the department, and he just told us, guys, we really need this apprenticeship system back. And particularly, he was very keen on us starting to work with what is referred to as the dual system. And so we did that. We had all sorts of work that we did over those years. There's the DSAP, Dual System Apprenticeship Pilot. There is the DSPP, Dual System Pilot Project, which is still going, in fact. But now today, we have the Centers of Specialization. And colleagues, here you have a nice little map of South Africa that shows you all across the country with the selected Centers of Specialization for various artisanal trades. And this is the new modern apprenticeship system that we're busy rolling out. It is the best way to describe it, it is a really, really colossal project. In fact, the department refers to it more as a program rather than project because it is so big. And the indications are, we've just finished with what we call a midterm evaluation of the process. The indications are that it's hard work. It's not all going all that well. There are areas where we need some additional fixing up. But one of the most significant benefits of this process that is starting to come out is the demand-led nature of this process, where employers, particularly at all these different places, are effectively leading the process. So that's good news, because we've always wanted to move towards a much more demand-led skill system. And so this is starting to take us there
Florus,
a lot faster. Yes?
Before you go on, a question from John Arneson. If a school leaver wants to become an artisan, for example, a motor mechanic, where do they go? Will they be guaranteed the workplace component of the apprenticeship?
So where do they go? Well, first of all, I always recommend, Andy and to John, the first thing they do is just make absolutely sure that that is what they want to do. And probably the best place where they can check that is the National Career Advisory Portal. It's called KETA, K-H-E-T-H-A, KETA. So if you had to Google KETA, you would go there. It is a very big portal, and it's got lots of little tests where you do self-evaluations and so on. And so a youngster can go there and have a look at the video. What does a motor mechanic do? There are some self-evaluation questions and processes just to check that you are inclined to that. But once they've agreed, they say, no, look, I want to be a motor mechanic or any other trade, I always suggest they then actually visit the nearest TVET college and to get advice from them. The biggest issue with an apprenticeship, as John has correctly said, is the workplace component. And if you can get contracted onto an apprenticeship by an employer, that is the best one. So many of the TVET colleges now have linkages with employers, particularly, by the way, for motor mechanics. You'll see on that thing, the College of Cape Town at their Athlone campus is very involved. Port Elizabeth is also very involved. But many of the other TVET colleges will do that. And so when they go to a TVET college, they go to the Career Advisory Support Center, or the support center at a college, and hopefully they will link them with an employer as part of the process. Similarly, of course, you can go to a private provider. And many of the private providers also have lots of linkages to employers. In fact, currently, the way I understand it is that the QCTO, when they consider accreditation for a skills development provider, they also require you to have arrangements in place, agreements in place with workplaces. So if you go to a provider that's accredited for motor mechanic, they need to have relationships with Imperial, Sandown Motors, or any other big motor companies where the youngster can practice their work. Okay, so that's it. Yes?
Another question from Morena Ritter. In fact, it's a request. It says, can you list the name of the portal here, please? Maybe the best place to do it is, in fact, afterwards in the WhatsApp and Telegram chats. So they'll have a more permanent place. People can list.
Okay. Yeah, the KETA portal. Sure. No, I'll do that. Thanks, Andy. Okay, colleagues, the one little point that I just want to mention around these centers of specialization, because it was a bit of confusion originally when these processes started, and some folks are still a bit confused. You know, when we say, now let me just use one example of, again, the College of Cape Town that does plumbers and motor mechanics. That does not mean that only the College of Cape Town will produce plumbers and motor mechanics. It does not mean that. Because a lot of people, when they first saw this, they said, but now this is crazy. How can you only train plumbers and motor mechanics at two colleges? What it means is that the College of Cape Town and their counterpart, the Port Elizabeth TVET College, are progressively developing special expertise, how you actually train a motor mechanic, the development of learning materials and so on. So they're becoming a center of specialization in the sense that they have a special expertise around it. So if somebody in Johannesburg wants to start training motor mechanics and they're not too sure exactly what is the best way to do it, so they can go to either College of Cape Town or the Port Elizabeth TVET College and say, guys, you know, I want to learn a bit more about motor mechanics. You know, you guys are the gurus, help me out here. So this is the concept behind the centers of specialization. The other point I just want to mention is that there is a very strong feeling already within the department and the QCTO, probably even more within the QCTO, is that the centers of specialization concept needs to be expanded beyond artisanal trades and start looking at other occupations as well, especially in the business sector as well as tourism and hospitality. I think there's a lot of scope for apprenticeships in those areas. Colleagues, I want to move on. So, as I said, this process got going in 2017, really. And then we had an opportunity in 2019 just to kind of check ourselves around our apprenticeship systems in South Africa. And we had an opportunity through the British Council in 2019 to do a global benchmarking check using a particular tool instrument that we all developed together with the International Labour Organization. And there were a whole range of questions that we had to ask, respond to, and so on. And there was a whole group of us, in fact, 12 people on a panel, including private providers, public providers, the government itself, various assessment centers, all sorts of people. And this was the result. We were surprised at, in fact, the positive results. If you look at that implementation without the T, you know, that spelling is wrong, and I apologize for that. It's a bit how we implement in South Africa. Sometimes we missed a little bit of detail. But we believe that we were doing quite well. Of course, this is at 96% of implementation. The problem with that in our country, of course, is that we've got pockets of excellence. So implementation is happening, but it's not happening all over at exactly the same kind of level. It is up and down. And as a result of this process, we asked ourselves the question, what is the biggest weakness? And the next slide shows the International Labour Organization's quality apprenticeship building blocks. These are the absolutely non-negotiable building blocks that they propose in their guidelines. And I've shown you the two toolkits that have come out from the International Labour Organization around apprenticeships. And we realize, in fact, through our global benchmarking, that the really, really big weakness we have in our system are clear roles and responsibilities. We are just not, nobody exactly knows what to do, when to do it, and so on. And that is why implementation only happens in pockets, because certain people know well and others just don't know well enough. And so what we did, we had a bit of spare cash with the British Council, very, very kindly. We then went ahead and we developed a digital guideline on the A21. And colleagues, this is live. I've put the links there. The usual link is the National Artisan Development Support Center, NADSC. There's the link there. However, I know that the colleagues at the NADC have indicated to me that often that link is down for various reasons. And so they have an alternate link which they have as a backup, and the alternate link is down the bottom there. It's an articulate rise link, which is the particular software that this guideline sits on. So please go and have a look at that. It takes you across all the different roles and responsibilities, all the different stakeholders, and what they are supposed to do, and so on. It was the first stab at such a digital guideline. Many of you will know that previously all our guidelines and processes in South Africa are generally just published in hard copy books and so on. And you do get them digitally, but they in a Word or a PDF or something. And this is the first time really we have almost an interactive type digital guideline, because it's got videos on there, it's got podcasts, it's also got quizzes, you can check your own knowledge and so on. And so it was a really nice little design, and it operates as a course. We even encourage the TVET colleges to take it and to use it to train their staff on a A21. And so it is a resource, it's completely free, it is there, and it can be used as a training course for yourself as well as others. And so when this work was done and we rolled it out, we sat back, we said, okay, hopefully this will get going a lot more. later we went into lockdown. So we almost sort of were fortuitous in that we put this online and it was digital because people had access to it. So this work has been there and people are using it slowly but surely. Maybe there's not enough advocacy yet on the process, but something has significantly happened as a result of that work, the A21 digital guideline around the various role players and roles and responsibilities. And this is what I'm referring to, is that the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations, QCTO, started a process just about October last year to say that they need to have a look also at a digital online mechanism, a checklist they call it, with a matrix backed up by a series of questions around what is the complete quality assurance system for occupational qualification implementation. And maybe just in brackets, dual system based, because there's a lot of thinking going on there. And so we've been working with them, and when we looked at that A21 digital guideline and all the bits and pieces that are around it, then we realized, in fact, that we could use a lot of it, but expand it. And some of your colleagues may have been on the awareness event from QCTO, which happened in the 23rd of April. And this was presented for the first time. Yesterday, we had another much more technical discussion with some employers and CETA colleagues around this. And generally speaking, everybody's reasonably happy with these 7 steps, as they are called. And we are now going beyond each of these 7 steps to say what are the actual roles and responsibilities of each stakeholder group within each of these steps. Like, for example, qualifications and program development, what do employers do, what do TVET colleges do, what does the department do, etc., accreditation of workplace approval, etc. I want to just pick up on one thing in these 7 steps that some of the colleagues might have noticed, and that's the step 5, which is knowledge and application. Of course, steps 1, 2, and 3 is very systemic. It's kind of like putting the system in place and advising people on careers. Step 4 is where a learner arrives, gets onto a program. So step 4 and 5 and 6 is the actual rollout of the program. But step 5, you'll notice it says knowledge and application. Now, this is a bit of a shift that is starting to happen at the QCTO, and we believe it's a good shift, in the way that they are designing and packaging the qualifications for rollout in the future. We currently have a situation where they have knowledge modules, practical modules, and workplace modules. But the work we've been doing around the apprenticeship system, and particularly the centers of specialization dual-based, more and more we are seeing that literally it is theory and practice. And the theory is happening at the TVET college, but it's kind of applied theory. So they not only learn from books, but they also do some applied theory in the workshop. And then they do the practice out at the workplace. So it seems like we're moving now much further towards knowledge and application as the design for qualifications in the future. It's still under discussion and debate, but those of you who've looked at the recent new skills programs that have come out from QCTO, many of them are also designed in that way. They have knowledge modules and application modules. And so they've combined the practical and the workplace modules. So colleagues, that's the process. I wanted to just share that with you. There's a lot of action going on in this space around apprenticeships. Globally, there's a huge amount of action as well. And just as a last point, I just want to indicate that the International Labour Organization is, of course, the absolute leader in global apprenticeship development. And they have already decided that at the 2022 International Labour Conference, that it happens in June every year, where almost all the countries in the world get together and they discuss all forms of very high-profile work-related matters. at that particular Labour conference in 2022, it's already on the agenda that we are hopefully going to be emerging with an internationally accepted apprenticeship standard, which is quite significant for apprenticeships. Andy, that's my story. I don't have much more to say.
Question from John Arneson.
Yes.
How do SAQA recognize professional bodies operating in the artisan space fit into the overall model?
Okay, so many of the professional bodies, and I can think of at least one that is directly artisan related, but of course, when it comes to apprentices, there could be quite a few. But for example, the Institute of Plumbing, which is a professional body that deals with plumbers, I think they do a large amount of the work in steps 1 and 2, the qualifications and program development. They are very important there because those professional bodies have members in there that are real subject matter experts. So I think that is a big area. And of course, the accreditation and workplace approval too. They have an input there. And of course, what happens in step 1, as you can see from those arrows, is applied in step 5 particularly, and of course in step 6 where the actual rollout happens. So John, your professional bodies are key for qualifications and program development. I would suspect they also would have a significant impact on employment and self-employment support beyond the actual program, because a professional body like the plumbers, for example, are very good. Once a youngster has completed the plumbing qualification, they're a plumber, they register with the professional body, and that professional body supports them with employment opportunities and so on as well. So I think they probably are all over the show. A big number for professional bodies is RPL, always assisting with recognition of prior learning. So I think professional bodies sort of fit in all of these steps, but big number, I think, is definitely number 1. We have to have the professional bodies involved in qualification and program development.
And then, Florus, another question from Jonathan Brawns. Why can there not be apprenticeships for professions other than trades, for example, management?
No, Jonathan, there can be. There's absolutely no reason why there can not be. And in fact, in South Africa, it's just that we have a history of apprenticeships being linked to the trades. But there are many people that are saying, let's move on from that. I'll give you an example, Jonathan. In the business sector, the German Chamber of Business have already developed and rolled out an apprenticeship for a business administration person, as well as, I believe, a logistics person, a person that works with freight forwarding and so on. And they have an apprenticeship that they are rolling out there. So an apprenticeship can be applied for any occupation. And if you're specifically thinking of management, Jonathan, some of the exciting work that is happening in the UK around degree-based apprenticeships. If the colleagues go have a look at the United Kingdom, they implemented a 1% levy for apprenticeships a few years ago. And many of the universities, including the likes of Oxford, which is remarkable, have degree-based apprenticeships. So you can go and do a management degree at many universities in the UK now, but apprenticeship style. So you rotate between the workplace and the university, learning your theory, applying it, and it is an apprenticeship-based management degree. So yes, Jonathan, it can apply to any qualification, any occupation. The modular-based design of occupational qualifications lends itself towards apprenticeships. So I think in the future, we will see many more apprenticeships for all occupations. In fact, it's my personal passion is just to have only apprenticeships, like they have in Switzerland. In Switzerland, you do one or two things.
First, then there are 3 questions. One is, which is, can you clarify then what is the difference between a learnership, a management learnership process, and a management apprenticeship process? I'm going to give you them all, and then you can think about them.
Sure.
So that's the one. Then from John Arneson, he's wanting a view. Will SA artisan skills gaps start to reduce? What's your view? And also the degree-based apprenticeship concept is very interesting. Is there work happening at the CHE in this regard? And then from last one from Maria Badenhorst, do you think the manuals will be printed in other languages except for English? Our general assistant keeps on failing the trade test due to measurement, etc., are in English. Then language barrier is a huge challenge. So a bunch of things.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Very good questions, by the way. Thank you for that. Yeah, colleagues, your learnership apprenticeship processes, as I indicated right in my very first slide, there is a huge overlap between the two. Both are workplace-based kind of rollout programs. Okay, and I think it's really just the way that you design the actual rollout. So, to be honest, I see very little difference between the learnership and apprenticeship. The most significant difference currently, and I think it is going to disappear fast, is those of you will know that learnerships have the requirement that every single unit is assessed and moderated and recorded on a system. Whereas with an apprenticeship, that is not that necessary. They have much more kind of in-between phase testing, which is done internally at a provider and doesn't have to be recorded and reported to a quality assurance body. And so that is why the administrative burden of a learnership is so heavy as opposed to an apprenticeship. The apprenticeship is based primarily on the final integrated summative assessment, or what most folks call a trade test. Although we believe that you still need some phase tests in between. Traditionally, you would get tested at the end of every year on a traditional apprenticeship. That is coming into modern apprenticeship, possibly a little bit more in between, but it's not a formal quality assured assessment. It's just a formative assessment to adjust learning and gaps and so on. I think that's probably the most significant difference between a learnership and an apprenticeship. And that's why a lot of people do favor the apprenticeship system, because it is more integrated and it's easier to administer. That is key. John, the issue around the degree apprenticeships in the UK and so on, and in other countries, by the way, Germany, Australia, the United States is also growing in that area. The United States don't have things like NQF and so on. They're a much more informal, unstructured economy. But many of the colleges in the United States, of course, in the USA, colleges are generally universities, and that's what they call their colleges, are also starting to move in this area. And what is moving in that area is the cost of university learning. Because, of course, once you are apprenticeship-based, even at a university, you're starting to share costs with the employers, and it's not all paid by the learner. I'm not aware of any work that the CHE is doing on apprenticeships. There was, and it may even still be going, a bit of a pilot study around a dual-based apprenticeship system for higher education in South Africa, and was carried out by the Institute of Post-School Studies at the University of Western Cape. And they were doing some work there together with support and I think funding from the Austrian government. The Austrians are, of course, very, very similar to Switzerland and Germany, very good with their apprenticeship systems. Many people don't realize that Austria is also very good at it. So I'm not aware of it there, but I think that as we go forward around in South Africa with the pressure on the cost of universities, it might still actually happen. Andy, I just for a minute didn't get the other two questions. Can you just quickly remind me?
So question was firstly from John, will the SA artisan skills gap start to reduce?
The gaps, yeah.
Then lastly from Maria Badenhorst says, the printing of the manuals in other languages apart from English is likely to happen.
John, I hope and pray that the gaps will decrease as we have much more demand-led systems where employers get much more involved in actually recruiting and determining the artisans that we need. In fact, there's a very interesting organization that emerged about a year or so ago, and we are also including them in our work processes. It's called the Unemployed Artisans of South Africa, and they are also involved in that to make sure that people who are artisans and can actually get work in the places where it's needed. So, John, I'm hoping so. I see some reasonably good signs emerging around a more demand-led process, and I hope and pray that as that happens, those gaps will be closed out. If I come back to the language issue, I absolutely agree with the lady. I think the need for additional languages is critically important, and it's always been a difficulty when it has to be done in a printed format. But as we move digitally, it becomes a lot easier, and I think it is possible to get more and more of these tests and so on in other languages. Just as an example, there in Germany, there are RPL systems in Germany, which is of course very much assessment based. They have converted many of their RPL processes to digital, and they offer RPL in 10 different languages at the moment on RPL in Germany, and they can do it because it's all digitally based now, you see. So my view is, as we go forward and many more of these processes are online digitally, there's no reason why we can't start converting them to our predominant languages. And I'd love to see isiXhosa, isiZulu, and even Afrikaans starting to be able to be used in many of our teaching and learning processes, because it really can have a major blocking barrier of learning for many people. Thank you.
John, Florus, that's all of our questions. So thank you very much. It's been very interesting.
Yeah, thank you everybody for listening. And I see my friend Kiru is there. Hi Kiru, nice to see you on the list. And done. Okay, take care.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.